We moved the meeting to the Ashford room. Didn't anyone tell you? The woman saying this is named Claire Pemberton. She is 43 years old. She is the Senior Director of Strategy and Operations at Whitmore Caldwell, a boutique management consulting firm headquartered on the 22nd floor of a limestone tower on Peachtree Street in Atlanta, Georgia. A firm whose client list includes 4 Fortune 500 companies and whose annual billings exceed $240 million, and whose lobby features a hand-lettered motto on the wall behind the reception desk that reads, "Excellence is not a department, it is a standard." Claire Pemberton has been with the firm for 14 years. She was promoted to Senior Director 3 years ago. She runs a team of 11 people. She has a reputation among the partners who evaluate her for being organized, decisive, and relentlessly effective. She has a reputation among the people who work beneath her for something else entirely, something that does not appear in performance reviews, because performance reviews measure what the company chooses to measure, and there are things no company has ever chosen to measure. Things like the temperature of a room when certain people walk into it, the particular cadence of a voice when it addresses certain names, the architecture of exclusion that operates not through doors that are locked, but through doors whose locations are never shared. Claire is standing in the hallway outside the Ashford room, which is a conference room on the 22nd floor that was not the original location for this morning's meeting. The original location was the Graham Room, 3 doors down, where the meeting had been scheduled for 9:30. The meeting was moved 40 minutes ago. An email was sent to every member of the senior leadership team. Every member except one. The one person who was not included on the email is standing 6 feet from Claire right now, holding a laptop and a leather portfolio and a cup of coffee that has gone cold because she has been sitting in the Graham Room alone for the past 22 minutes, waiting for colleagues who were never going to arrive, checking her watch, refreshing her email, feeling the slow, familiar tightening in her stomach that comes from knowing something is wrong before you can name what it is. Her name is Nadine Jeffers. She is 36 years old. She is the only Black woman on the senior leadership team at Whitmore Caldwell. And the meeting she was excluded from, the one happening right now behind the closed door of the Ashford room, is the meeting where the partners are deciding who will be promoted to the firm's newly created Vice President of Client Strategy position, a role that Nadine has been preparing for, has been explicitly told she was being considered for, has restructured her entire professional life around for the past 11 months. In approximately 14 hours, at 7:47 tomorrow morning, every employee at Whitmore Caldwell is going to open their inbox and find an email from the CEO that will make Claire Pemberton's hands shake so violently she will spill coffee on her keyboard and have to request a replacement from IT, a request she will make with her voice barely above a whisper, because the email will have made it impossible for her to speak at full volume in this building ever again. But that is tomorrow morning. Right now, Claire is standing in the hallway with her arms crossed, and Nadine is standing 6 feet away with cold coffee and the particular stillness of a woman who has spent her entire career learning to hold steady in the exact moment when the ground disappears beneath her. The meeting in the Ashford room had been Claire's idea, not the meeting itself, which had been on the calendar for 2 weeks, scheduled by the managing partner Howard Whitmore as the final step in the VP selection process. Claire's idea was to move it. She had sent the email at 8:47 that morning, 43 minutes before the scheduled start time, to the 7 other members of the senior leadership team, informing them that the location had been changed due to a scheduling conflict with the Graham Room. There was no scheduling conflict. Claire had checked the room reservation system. The Graham Room was available all morning. She had invented the conflict because she needed the meeting to happen without Nadine, and a room change communicated to everyone except Nadine was the cleanest mechanism she could devise, clean enough to be deniable, casual enough to be attributed to an oversight, effective enough to ensure that when the partners discussed the VP promotion, the person most qualified for it would not be in the room to advocate for herself. Claire had not articulated this plan to herself in these terms. She had not sat at her desk and thought, I am going to exclude the Black woman from the promotion meeting because I do not want her to get the job. That is not how it works. That is almost never how it works. What Claire had thought in the pre-verbal space where institutional bias operates was that the discussion would go more smoothly without Nadine present, that the team would be more candid, that there were concerns about Nadine's readiness that would be easier to voice if Nadine were not sitting across the table with her data and her case studies and her quiet, devastating competence making it difficult to say out loud the things that Claire felt in her bones, but could not translate into language that would survive scrutiny. Claire did not think she was being racist. Claire thought she was being strategic. The difference between those two things is the space in which most institutional discrimination lives, and it is a space so narrow that the people who inhabit it cannot see the walls. To understand Nadine Jeffers, you need to understand a kitchen in a second-floor apartment in the Mechanicsville neighborhood of Atlanta. A kitchen with yellow walls and a window that looked out over a parking lot, and a linoleum floor that had been mopped so many times the pattern had worn away in front of the stove and the sink, the two places where Nadine's mother, Gloria Jeffers, spent most of her standing hours. Gloria was a bookkeeper. She worked for a succession of small businesses in Southwest Atlanta, accounting firms and dental offices, and a plumbing company and a church, keeping their ledgers straight, reconciling their accounts, filing their quarterly taxes, performing the invisible financial labor that keeps small enterprises alive without ever appearing on the marquee. She was good at it. She was extraordinary at it. She could find a 6-cent discrepancy in a 12-page spreadsheet the way a jeweler finds a flaw in a diamond, by instinct refined through 10,000 hours of practice until it no longer felt like skill, but like sight. Gloria Jeffers had wanted to be an accountant, not a bookkeeper, an accountant. The distinction matters. A bookkeeper records transactions. An accountant interprets them, advises on them, signs off on them, carries the professional credential that transforms numerical competence into institutional authority. Gloria had completed 2 years of coursework toward her accounting degree at Clark Atlanta University before Nadine was born. She had intended to go back. Then Nadine's father, James Jeffers, a long-haul truck driver who had proposed to Gloria on the steps of Ebenezer Baptist Church and who had a laugh that Gloria said could fill a gymnasium, was killed in a highway accident outside Birmingham, Alabama, when Nadine was 18 months old. A tractor-trailer jackknifed in rain on I-20. James was in the cab. The official report said he died on impact. Gloria received a phone call at 2 a.m. from the Alabama State Police. She was 24 years old. She had a toddler asleep in the next room. She had 2 years of college credit and no degree. She had a lease and an electricity bill and a funeral to pay for. She went back to work 11 days after the funeral because 11 days was what she could afford. She never went back to school because school was what she could not afford. Not the tuition alone, but the time, the hours that school would take from work. And work was the only thing keeping the apartment and the yellow kitchen and the daughter who slept in the next room tethered to something stable. Gloria made a decision that morning, 11 days after burying her husband, sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator and a legal pad, adding up what she had and subtracting what she owed, and looking at the number at the bottom, which was negative, which was a deficit, which was a hole she would spend the next 20 years filling with labor and discipline, and the particular ferocity of a woman who has decided that the hole will not swallow her child. The decision was this: she would work, she would raise Nadine, she would make sure Nadine finished what Gloria could not, and she would never, ever let Nadine see her cry about it. Nadine grew up in the yellow kitchen. She did her homework at the table where her mother reconciled other people's books. She learned arithmetic not from worksheets, but from watching Gloria's fingers move across a 10-key calculator with a speed that seemed mechanical until you noticed that Gloria was also talking, also checking on dinner, also listening to the news on a radio that sat on the counter between the toaster and the dish rack. Multitasking not as a productivity technique, but as a survival strategy. Because when you are the only adult in a household, and the only income and the only parent, everything happens simultaneously, or it does not happen at all. Nadine was quiet as a child, not shy. Quiet. The distinction matters because shy implies a desire to participate, held back by fear, and Nadine was not afraid. She was observing. She watched the way her mother handled clients who questioned her work, the calm, factual responses, the refusal to raise her voice, the way Gloria would simply point to the number on the page and say, "This is what the numbers show," and let the silence after the sentence do the work of persuasion. She watched the way her mother dressed for work, always pressed, always precise, shoes polished on Sunday night for the week ahead, because Gloria understood that the world she moved through required a black woman to be immaculate in order to be taken seriously, and sometimes immaculate was not enough, but it was the minimum, and you do not go out without the minimum. Nadine absorbed this. She absorbed the arithmetic and the discipline and the pressed clothes and the quiet authority of a woman who knew she was the smartest person in most rooms she entered, and who had made peace with the fact that the rooms would never acknowledge it. By the time Nadine was 12, she could balance a checkbook. By 14, she was helping her mother with client spreadsheets on weekends, sitting at the kitchen table, the calculator between them, the radio on, the parking lot outside the window filling with the cars of people whose lives looked easier from a distance, and might have been, but whose books, Gloria would say, told a different story because everyone's books tell a different story than their face. Nadine graduated third in her class at Mays High School. She received a scholarship to Spelman College, where she double majored in economics and mathematics, a combination her academic advisor called ambitious and her mother called obvious. She graduated summa cum laude. She was recruited by 3 consulting firms before her senior year ended. She chose Whitmore Caldwell because of a sentence in their recruitment brochure that said, "We do not hire for pedigree, we hire for potential." Nadine believed the sentence. Gloria read the brochure and said nothing, which was Gloria's way of saying she had opinions about brochures written by firms that had never hired a black woman from Mechanicsville, but that she would keep those opinions in the kitchen where they belonged until events proved her right or wrong. Events, as Gloria expected, would take their time. Nadine started at Whitmore Caldwell 8 years ago as an associate consultant. She was 28. She was the only black woman in her incoming cohort of 12. She was one of 3 black employees in the entire firm, the other 2 being a paralegal in the legal department and a facilities coordinator who managed the building's maintenance contracts. The firm had 87 employees. Nadine did the math in her head on her first day, the way her mother would have, automatically, instinctively, reducing the landscape to its numerical truth. 3 out of 87, 3.4%, in a city that is 51% black. The numbers told a story. Nadine read it and went to work anyway because the alternative was to not go to work. And Gloria Jeffers did not raise a woman who stayed home because the numbers were discouraging. Gloria Jeffers raised a woman who changed the numbers. In her first year, Nadine was assigned to a client engagement for a regional healthcare system that was restructuring its operations across 14 facilities. The project was led by Claire Pemberton, who was then a director and who had specifically requested a junior associate she described as organized and low maintenance. Nadine was assigned. She was organized. She was not low maintenance, though it took Claire 3 months to realize this, because Nadine's version of high maintenance did not involve complaints or demands or visible friction. It involved questions about methodology, questions about assumptions, questions about why certain data points were excluded from the analysis, and whether their exclusion affected the conclusions. Claire found the questions irritating. She told Nadine, during a one-on-one review at the 4-month mark, that the role of an associate was to execute, not to interrogate. Nadine said she understood. She continued asking questions. She asked them more carefully, framing them as clarifications rather than challenges, wrapping her intellectual rigor in the diplomatic padding that black women in predominantly white professional environments learn to apply the way surgeons apply gauze, not because the wound needs covering, but because the people around the wound need protection from the sight of it. The project was completed on time and under budget. The client gave the engagement team its highest satisfaction rating in 3 years. Claire took credit for the outcome in her annual review. She mentioned Nadine by name once, in a sentence that described her as a reliable contributor. Nadine read the review summary. She noted the word reliable. She noted the word contributor. She noted the absence of the words exceptional, innovative, strategic, or indispensable, words that appeared in Claire's descriptions of other team members whose contributions, Nadine knew from direct observation, were not greater than hers. She noted this the way Gloria noted a 6-cent discrepancy, quietly, precisely, without surprise. Over the next 7 years, Nadine was promoted 3 times, associate consultant to senior consultant in year 2, senior consultant to manager in year 4, manager to senior manager in year 6. Each promotion came approximately 6 to 12 months later than it came for her white peers with comparable performance metrics, a pattern Nadine tracked in a private spreadsheet she kept on her personal laptop, a spreadsheet she never showed anyone, not because she was ashamed of it, but because she understood that producing a spreadsheet documenting racial disparities in promotion timing at her own firm would be received not as analysis, but as accusation. An accusation, in corporate environments, is a category error that transforms the person presenting the evidence into the problem the evidence describes. Nadine did not want to be the problem. She wanted to solve the problem. She wanted to rise high enough within the firm to have the authority to change the systems that produced the disparities she was tracking. This was not naive. It was strategic. It was the same strategy Gloria had employed at the kitchen table, working within the system's rules, mastering its language, earning its credentials, accumulating its currency, until the day came when she had enough leverage to spend. Nadine was patient. She was not passive. There is a difference, and the difference is the spreadsheet. In her 7th year, Nadine was promoted to senior manager and added to the senior leadership team, a group of 8 people who reported directly to the managing partner and who collectively oversaw all client engagements, business development, and operational strategy. She was the first Black person on the team in the firm's 26-year history. Howard Whitmore, the managing partner, announced the appointment in a company-wide email that described Nadine as an exemplary leader whose analytical rigor and client-first approach embodied the values of this firm. Claire Pemberton, who was also on the senior leadership team and who had worked alongside Nadine for 7 years without ever recommending her for advancement, replied all to the email with a single word: "Congratulations." The period after the word was visible. Nadine saw it. She recognized it. It was the punctuation equivalent of a door closing. 11 months before the morning of the moved meeting, Howard Whitmore announced the creation of a new position, Vice President of Client Strategy. The role was designed to sit between the senior leadership team and the partnership, a bridge position that carried authority over the firm's largest client relationships and that was understood by everyone in the building to be the final step before partnership itself. Howard described the role in a leadership meeting as requiring someone with deep analytical capability, proven client management skills, the ability to build consensus across teams, and a track record of delivering results that exceed expectations. He said the selection process would be rigorous and merit-based. He said he would personally oversee the evaluation. He looked around the table as he said this, making eye contact with each member of the senior leadership team in turn. When his eyes reached Nadine, he held the contact a fraction of a second longer than he had with the others, a gesture so brief that only Nadine registered it, and what she registered was not favoritism, but recognition, the quiet acknowledgement of a managing partner who knew the numbers as well as she did, and who understood that this promotion would either prove the firm's stated values or expose them. Nadine spent the next 11 months building her case. She did not campaign. She did not lobby. She compiled. She created a portfolio of her client outcomes, including revenue attribution, client retention rates, satisfaction scores, and engagement efficiency metrics. She documented her leadership contributions, including a mentorship program she had designed and launched that had improved junior consultant retention by 23% over 2 years. She prepared a strategic vision document for the VP role, a 12-page analysis of the firm's client portfolio that identified 3 untapped market segments and projected incremental revenue of $18 to $24 million over a 36-month implementation horizon. She reviewed the document with her mother during a Sunday dinner in the Yellow Kitchen. Gloria, who was 61 and whose eyesight was not what it had been, and whose fingers still moved across the calculator with the same mechanical precision they had always carried, read the revenue projections and said, "You are sure about these numbers?" Nadine said, "The models have been stress tested against 3 scenarios." Gloria said, "That is not what I asked. I asked if you are sure." Nadine looked at her mother. She said, "I am sure." Gloria nodded. She folded the document and handed it back and said, "Then it does not matter what they think. The numbers are true. Whether they read them or not is their problem." It was the same thing Gloria had said to difficult clients for 35 years. This is what the numbers show. The numbers do not need your approval. They need your attention. The morning of the meeting, Nadine arrived at the office at 8:15. She went to her desk on the 22nd floor, reviewed her portfolio one final time, printed 2 copies, and placed them in her leather bag alongside her laptop. She checked the calendar. Graham Room, 9:30. She reviewed the attendee list. All 8 members of the senior leadership team, Howard Whitmore, 2 other partners joining by video conference. She poured a cup of coffee from the break room. She returned to her desk. She worked on a client deliverable until 9:20, then gathered her materials and walked to the Graham Room. She arrived at 9:24. The room was empty. The lights were on. The projector was warmed up. The chairs were arranged around the table in the configuration that the facilities team always used for leadership meetings. Everything was in order. Nadine sat down. She opened her laptop. She arranged her printed portfolios at her place at the table. She waited. 9:30 arrived. No one else did. 9:32, 9:35. Nadine checked her email. Nothing. She checked her calendar again. Graham room, 9:30, confirmed. She refreshed her email. Nothing. 9:38, 9:40. The coffee was getting cold. The room was getting warm in the way that rooms do when a single person sits in them alone and the silence begins to accumulate mass. The particular weight of being in the right place at the right time and discovering that the right place has been relocated without your knowledge. At 9:41, Nadine stood up. She walked to the hallway. She looked towards the other conference rooms. The Ashford room, 3 doors down, had its door closed. She could see shadows of movement through the frosted glass panel. She could hear voices. She walked toward it. She opened the door 3 inches. Inside, seated around the table, were Claire Pemberton, the 6 other members of the senior leadership team, Howard Whitmore, and, on the large screen mounted on the wall, the 2 partners joining remotely. The meeting was in progress. A presentation was on the screen. Someone was mid-sentence. The door's movement created a draft. Heads turned. Howard Whitmore saw Nadine's face in the 3-inch gap, and his expression shifted from professional attention to something Nadine could not immediately read, something between confusion and the beginning of a recognition that something had gone wrong. Nadine closed the door. She stepped back into the hallway. She stood there for a moment, holding her cold coffee and her leather portfolio and the 12-page strategic vision document that no one in that room was going to see. And then Claire Pemberton came through the door. We moved the meeting to the Ashford room. Didn't anyone tell you? Claire's face was arranged in an expression of mild concern, the kind of concern that is designed to simulate empathy while deflecting responsibility, the facial equivalent of the passive voice. The meeting was moved. Anyone could have told you. The absence of information is positioned as a collective failure rather than an individual act. Nadine looked at Claire. She did not respond immediately. She was running calculations, the email she had not received, the timing of the change, 43 minutes before a meeting that had been on the calendar for 2 weeks. The fact that every other member of the team was in the room and had been there since 9:30, which meant the email had reached them with enough time to redirect. The fact that she, Nadine, had not received it. The mathematical probability that an email sent to 8 people would accidentally exclude exactly 1 person, the only black woman, for a meeting about a promotion she was the leading candidate for. Nadine ran the numbers the way her mother ran numbers, automatically, instinctively, reducing the situation to its numerical truth. The probability was not 0. Oversights happen, emails fail, systems glitch. But the probability was small enough that it required a specific explanation, and Claire was not offering a specific explanation. Claire was offering a shrug dressed as a sentence. Nadine said, "No, no one told me. I have been in the Graham room since 9:24. Claire said, "Oh, that is unfortunate. There was a scheduling issue. I sent an email this morning. You must not have gotten it. Let me check." She pulled out her phone. She scrolled. She looked at the screen for a moment that lasted exactly long enough for Nadine to understand that Claire was not checking. Claire was performing. The performance had the rhythm of a person who knows what they will find because they constructed the finding. Claire looked up. She said, "It looks like you were accidentally left off the distribution. I am so sorry. That is completely my fault. I must have missed your name when I was updating the list. I will make sure it does not happen again." She smiled. The smile was the same temperature as Nadine's coffee. Claire turned and walked back into the Ashford room. The door closed behind her. The frosted glass showed the shadows of people resuming their seats, returning to the presentation, continuing the discussion that would determine Nadine's career without Nadine's voice in it. Nadine stood in the hallway. She did not go in. She understood that walking into that room now, 11 minutes late, without having been present for the opening discussion, without having been included in the contextual framing that shapes how candidates are evaluated, would position her as an afterthought rather than a contender. She understood that Claire's apology, delivered in the hallway rather than in the room, ensured that the partners would not know Nadine had been excluded until after the discussion had been shaped by her absence. She understood that the game had been played and that the game had been designed to produce exactly this outcome. A candidate sidelined by an oversight that was not an oversight, an exclusion that could not be proved because the architecture of exclusion had been built with plausible deniability as its load-bearing wall. Nadine went back to her desk. She sat down. She set the cold coffee on a coaster. She opened the leather portfolio. She looked at the 12-page strategic vision document, the document that projected $18 to $24 million in incremental revenue, the document her mother had read in the yellow kitchen and asked, "Are you sure?" And Nadine had said, "I am sure." She closed the portfolio. She opened her laptop. She began composing an email to Howard Whitmore. She typed 3 sentences. Then she deleted them. She typed 2 more. Deleted them. She stared at the blank screen for 4 minutes. Then she closed the laptop. She picked up her phone. She called her mother. Gloria answered on the first ring. She always answers on the first ring when Nadine calls during work hours because Nadine does not call during work hours unless something has happened, and Gloria has spent 35 years calibrating her response times to the frequency of other people's emergencies. Nadine said, "Mama, they moved the meeting without telling me." Gloria was quiet for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Gloria Jeffers, 61 years old, a bookkeeper from Mechanicsville who had never set foot on the 22nd floor of any building in her life, performed the same calculation her daughter had performed in the hallway. She assessed the probability. She assessed the timing. She assessed the pattern. She had been assessing patterns her entire life, patterns in ledgers, and patterns in behavior, and patterns in the way that certain systems produce certain outcomes for certain people with a consistency that is not random and not accidental and not attributable to any single actor, but that emerges from the structure itself, the way water finds the lowest point, not because it chooses to, but because gravity does not offer alternatives. Gloria said, "Who moved it?" Nadine said, "Claire." Gloria said, "And who was in the room?" Nadine named them. Gloria said, "And Howard?" Nadine said, "Yes." Gloria was quiet again. Then she said, "Do you have your numbers?" Nadine said, "Yes." Gloria said, "Are they right?" Nadine said, "They are right." Gloria said, "Then you send those numbers to the man who makes the decision. You do not send them to the woman who moved the meeting. You send them to the man whose name is on the building. You send them with your name on the cover and your analysis in the body and your projections in the appendix, and you let the numbers do what numbers do. And if the numbers are not enough, then the building is not big enough for you, and you find one that is. But you do not stand in a hallway and accept an apology from a woman who is not sorry. You sit at your desk and you do the work." Nadine said, "Yes, ma'am." Gloria said, "And Nadine?" Nadine said, "Yes." Gloria said, "Do not let them see you cry, not because crying is weak, because they do not deserve to see it. Save it for the kitchen. The kitchen is ours." Nadine said, "I love you." Gloria said, "I know." She hung up. Nadine put the phone down. She opened her laptop. She composed an email to Howard Whitmore. The email was 7 sentences long. It said that she had been unable to attend the VP selection meeting due to a communication oversight. It said that she had prepared a comprehensive portfolio and strategic vision document for the role. It attached both documents as PDFs. It said that she would welcome the opportunity to present her candidacy directly if the timeline permitted. It did not mention Claire. It did not mention the Ashford room. It did not mention the hallway or the cold coffee or the 11 minutes she spent standing outside a closed door while her career was discussed without her. It was 7 sentences of pure, controlled professionalism, each one constructed with the precision of a woman who had learned from a bookkeeper that the numbers speak for themselves and that the person presenting the numbers must never speak louder than the truth they contain. She pressed send at 10:17. She went back to her client deliverable. She worked through lunch. She did not speak to Claire or any other member of the senior leadership team for the rest of the day. She left the office at 6:45, drove to Mechanicsville, and sat at the kitchen table with her mother and ate leftover chicken and rice and did not talk about what had happened because the kitchen was theirs and the kitchen was for living, not for rehearsing the injuries inflicted by buildings that were not big enough. At 9:32 that evening, Nadine's phone buzzed. It was an email from Howard Whitmore. The subject line was VP selection process. The email was 4 sentences. It said that he had received her materials. It said that he had reviewed them. It said that he wanted to meet with her in his office at 8 o'clock the following morning before the start of business. It said, "Please bring the original portfolio." Nadine read the email twice. She showed it to Gloria. Gloria read it once. She said, 8 o'clock means he is making time before the day starts. That means it matters, Nadine said, or it means he is going to tell me the decision has already been made. Gloria looked at her daughter over the top of her reading glasses, the same dollar store glasses she had been wearing for 6 years because the lenses were what mattered, and Gloria Jeffers did not spend money on frames. She said, "You went to Spelman. You graduated summa cum laude. You have been at that firm for 8 years. You have never missed a number, never missed a deadline, never missed a target. You wrote a 12-page document that shows them how to make $18 million. They did not know they could make. If that man looks at you tomorrow morning and tells you someone else deserves this more, then he cannot read. And if he cannot read, that is his problem, not yours." Nadine did not sleep well that night. She lay in her apartment in Midtown, a 1-bedroom she had furnished with careful economy, each piece chosen for function and durability rather than display, the apartment of a woman who had been raised to understand that money is a tool and not a decoration. She stared at the ceiling. She thought about the hallway. She thought about Claire's face, the performed surprise, the calibrated apology, the smile that was the same temperature as cold coffee. She thought about the closed door and the shadows moving behind frosted glass. She thought about her mother at 24, sitting at the kitchen table with a calculator and a legal pad, adding up what she had and subtracting what she owed. She thought about her father, James Jeffers, who had a laugh that could fill a gymnasium and who died on I-20 in the rain 18 months after his daughter was born. She had one photograph of him, taken at a cookout in someone's backyard, holding a paper plate and grinning at the camera with the particular joy of a man who does not know he has 17 months left. The photograph was in a frame on her nightstand. She looked at it in the dark. She said, "Dad, I do not know if this is going to work." The photograph did not answer. Photographs never do. But the face in the photograph was grinning, and the grin said what James Jeffers' grin had apparently always said, which was that the world is hard and unfair and tilted in directions you did not choose, and you show up anyway, and you bring everything you have, and you let the room deal with you because you are not the problem. The room is the problem, and rooms can be rebuilt. Nadine arrived at Howard Whitmore's office at 7:53. She was wearing a navy blazer, a white blouse, black trousers, and her mother's watch, a Timex with a scratched crystal, and a leather band that Gloria had worn for 22 years before giving it to Nadine on the day she started at Whitmore Caldwell. The watch kept perfect time. It was not expensive, it was not impressive, it was her mother's. It carried 35 years of bookkeeping and early mornings and late nights, and the particular weight of a woman who had never missed a number, and wearing it on her wrist made Nadine feel like Gloria was sitting beside her, which was not a metaphor. It was a structural support. Howard Whitmore was already in his office. He was 64 years old, a tall man with silver hair and the deliberate posture of someone who had been a collegiate rower and who still carried the discipline of that sport in his spine. He had founded Whitmore Caldwell in 1998 with a business partner named David Caldwell, who had retired in 2015. Howard had built the firm from a 3-person operation in a rented office in Buckhead to a $240 million enterprise on Peachtree Street, and he had done it with a combination of analytical rigor and personal integrity that his employees, even the ones who feared him, acknowledged as genuine. Howard was not a warm man. He was a fair one. There is a difference, and Nadine had learned to value the difference, because warmth without fairness is performance, and fairness without warmth is structure, and structure is what you need when the ground shifts. Howard gestured Nadine to a chair across from his desk. He had her documents in front of him, the 12-page strategic vision, the portfolio, her email from the previous morning. He also had something else, a printout of the company's email server log, showing the distribution list for Claire's room change email. The log showed 8 recipients. Nadine's name was not on it. Howard looked at the log. He looked at Nadine. He said, "Tell me what happened yesterday." Nadine told him. She told him without embellishment, without editorializing, without the emotional overlay that the situation invited. She spoke the way her mother spoke to clients. This is what the numbers show. She described arriving at the Graham room, the empty room, the wait, the walk to the Ashford room, the closed door, the shadows behind frosted glass, Claire's explanation in the hallway, the apology that was not an apology, the decision not to enter the meeting because entering late would have positioned her as an afterthought, the email she sent instead. Howard listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat in silence for nearly a full minute. Nadine counted the seconds. She had learned from Gloria that silence after a presentation is not a void. It is a space where the listener is processing, and you must not fill it, because filling it means you do not trust the strength of what you have already said. Howard said, "I read your strategic vision last night." Nadine said nothing. He said, "It is the most comprehensive analysis of our client portfolio that anyone on the leadership team has produced in the 3 years I have been considering this position. The revenue projections are conservative, which I appreciate, because conservative projections from a rigorous analyst are worth more than optimistic projections from an enthusiastic one. Your methodology is sound. Your market identification is precise. I showed it to David Caldwell. He read it from his house in Hilton Head and called me at 11 o'clock last night and said, 'Who wrote this, and why have you not promoted her yet?'" Nadine felt the heat behind her eyes. She did not let it reach the surface. "Not here. The kitchen is for tears. This office is for numbers." Howard leaned forward. He said, "Nadine, I need you to understand something. The decision about the VP position was not made in yesterday's meeting. The meeting was a discussion. The decision is mine. It has always been mine. And I made it 6 weeks ago, after I reviewed the quarterly metrics and saw your fingerprints on every successful engagement this firm completed in the last fiscal year. You are the Vice President of Client Strategy. The title is effective immediately. The formal announcement will go out tomorrow morning." Nadine's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs beneath the desk where Howard could not see them. She said, "Thank you, Howard." He said, "Do not thank me. You earned this. I should have done it sooner." Then he paused. He said, "Now, tell me about the email distribution list." Nadine looked at him. She said, "I think you already know what it tells you." Howard said, "I want to hear you say it." Nadine said, "It tells you that someone on the leadership team made a deliberate decision to exclude me from a meeting about my own promotion." Howard said, "Yes, it does." The email arrived at 7:47 the next morning. It was sent from Howard Whitmore's account to the company-wide distribution list, which included every employee at Whitmore Caldwell, from the partners to the paralegals to the facilities coordinator who managed the building's maintenance contracts. The subject line was 3 words: organizational announcement and standards. The email was not long. It did not need to be. It said that effective immediately, Nadine Jeffers had been promoted to Vice President of Client Strategy. It said that the promotion was based on an exhaustive review of her performance, her client outcomes, her leadership contributions, and a strategic vision document that the managing partner described as the most impressive internal analysis he had seen in his tenure. It said that Nadine's revenue projections had been reviewed by the founding partners and endorsed without modification. It said that her portfolio would be shared with the full leadership team as a model for future strategic planning. Then it said something else. It said that, in the course of the selection process, a serious breach of the firm's professional standards had come to the managing partner's attention. It said that a member of the senior leadership team had deliberately excluded a candidate from a scheduled meeting by failing to include her on a communication that was sent to all other participants. It said that this exclusion was not an oversight. It was identified through a review of the email server logs and corroborated by the affected individual's account. It said that conduct of this nature was incompatible with the values of the firm and would not be tolerated. It said that the individual responsible had been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a formal review by the firm's HR department and outside counsel. It did not name Claire Pemberton. It did not need to. In a firm of 87 people, where the senior leadership team consisted of 8 members and the email logs told a story that only one person could have authored, the absence of a name was itself an identification. The email concluded with a sentence that would be quoted in internal discussions, in industry articles, and in the resignation letter that Claire Pemberton would submit 48 hours later. The sentence read, "The measure of this firm is not the excellence we achieve when the process works as intended. It is the accountability we demand when the process is deliberately undermined. We failed one of our best people. That failure is mine to own and ours to correct. It will not happen again." Claire Pemberton read the email at her desk. She read it twice. Her hands shook so severely that the coffee cup she was holding tipped and spilled across her keyboard, the brown liquid seeping between the keys, shorting the circuit, the screen flickering and going dark. She called IT and requested a replacement. Her voice was barely above a whisper. The IT technician who brought the new keyboard later told a colleague in the break room that Claire looked like someone who had opened a door and found the room on the other side completely different from the one she expected. Every wall moved, every piece of furniture rearranged. The entire architecture of her professional life revealed to be a structure she had built on a foundation that could not hold. Claire submitted her resignation 2 days later. The resignation letter was 3 paragraphs. It cited personal reasons. It did not mention Nadine. It did not mention the Ashford room. It did not mention the email she had sent to 7 people at 8:47 on a Tuesday morning. The email that excluded the 8th person with a precision that was either a catastrophic accident or a deliberate act, and the email server logs had already answered which one it was. Nadine did not attend Claire's departure. She did not need to. She was in a client meeting, presenting the strategic vision that Howard Whitmore had described as the most impressive internal analysis he had seen. The same document her mother had read in the yellow kitchen, the same numbers Gloria had asked about with the 2-word question that contained everything, "Are you sure?" The client, a regional healthcare system, undergoing a transformation that would affect 11,000 employees across 9 facilities, listened to Nadine's presentation for 75 minutes. At the end, the CEO of the healthcare system, a woman named Dr. Patricia Owens, who had been in healthcare administration for 30 years and who had heard thousands of presentations from hundreds of consultants, said, "This is the first time a consulting firm has shown me not just where we are, but where we could be, and made me believe the distance between the two is crossable." She signed a 32-month engagement contract, valued at $14.6 million. It was the largest single client engagement in Whitmore Caldwell's history. Nadine sent a photograph of the signed contract to her mother. Gloria called her. She said, $14.6 million. Nadine said, "Yes, ma'am." Gloria was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Your father would have laughed so loud the building would have heard it." Nadine said, "I know." Gloria said, "I am proud of you." Those 4 words, "I am proud of you," spoken by a 61-year-old bookkeeper from Mechanicsville into a phone she held with hands that had reconciled other people's money for 35 years, hands that had written checks she could not cash and balanced books she could not own, and raised a daughter on a kitchen table in a yellow room in an apartment above a parking lot in a neighborhood the rest of the city drove past without looking. Those 4 words carried a weight that no contract and no title and no corner office could equal, because the words came from the woman who had made all of it possible by showing up every morning for 35 years and performing invisible labor with visible precision and refusing to let the gap between what she deserved and what she received become the story of her life. Gloria made the gap the fuel. Nadine made the gap the distance she crossed. And the crossing was not finished. It was never finished. That is the truth about gaps. You do not cross them once. You cross them every morning when you put on the blazer and the watch and the pressed blouse and walk into a building where someone has moved the meeting without telling you, and you find the room anyway, because the room was never the point. You were the point. You were always the point. The watch is on Nadine's wrist right now, the Timex with the scratched crystal. It keeps perfect time. It cost Gloria $19 at a department store in 1989. A purchase Gloria made the week she started her first bookkeeping job because she wanted to own something that was precise, something that did not lie, something that measured the world accurately regardless of who was looking at it or what they expected to see. Nadine wears it every day. She wears it in client meetings and leadership sessions, in the quarterly reviews where she now sits at the table as a vice president. In the room, in the conversation, her voice counted, her numbers read, her name on the agenda, rather than excluded from the email. She wears it when she visits her mother on Sundays in the yellow kitchen, where Gloria still sits with her calculator and her clients' books, still finding 6-cent discrepancies, still pressing her clothes on Sunday night, still refusing to spend money on frames when the lenses are what matter. Nadine told her mother about the watch once, about what it means to her, about how wearing it makes her feel like Gloria is with her in every room she enters. Gloria listened. She looked at the watch on her daughter's wrist. She said, "It is just a watch, baby. It tells the time." Nadine said, "It tells more than the time." Gloria said, "I know, but do not tell the watch that. It will get a big head." They laughed. It was the kind of laughter that happens in kitchens between women who have survived things together that they do not always name. The kind of laughter that is not the absence of grief, but the presence of something stronger, something that has been tested and held. Something that looks from the outside like a $19 watch and a yellow kitchen and a calculator and a parking lot, but that is, from the inside, everything. Have you ever been left out of a room where your future was being decided? Have you ever discovered that the people who were supposed to include you chose not to? Not because you were unqualified, but because your qualification was itself the threat, because your competence made their mediocrity visible, because your presence in the room would have required them to compete on merit rather than on proximity, and proximity was the only advantage they had. If you have, then you know that the exclusion is not the worst part. The worst part is the moment after, the moment when you stand in the hallway with cold coffee and a 12-page document that no one asked to see, and you calculate the probability that it was an accident, and the probability comes back too low, and you have to decide what to do with the knowledge that the system you have given 8 years of your life to has produced a result that is consistent with everything you have always known and had always hoped would be different. Nadine Jeffers stood in that hallway. She did not break, she did not shout, she did not cry. She went back to her desk and she did the work and she sent the email and she let the numbers speak. And the numbers spoke. They always do. Not because numbers are magical or because justice is inevitable or because the world rewards excellence automatically. Because it does not, ask Gloria, ask any woman who has cleaned a house where the jewelry was counted. The numbers spoke because Nadine put them on the page and pressed send and trusted that somewhere in the building, someone could read. Howard Whitmore could read. He read the numbers, and he read the server logs, and he read the distance between what his firm promised and what his firm delivered, and he decided, at 11 o'clock at night in his home office, that the distance was unacceptable. He wrote the email that arrived at 7:47 the next morning. He wrote it himself. He did not run it through communications or legal or the diplomatic filters that corporations use to sand the edges off accountability until it is smooth enough to be meaningless. He wrote, "We failed one of our best people." He wrote, "That failure is mine to own." He used the first person because the first person is where accountability lives, not in the passive voice, not in mistakes were made, not in we are committed to doing better, but in I failed and I will fix it and it will not happen again. Whether it happens again is a question that the future will answer and that no email, however honest, can guarantee. The system that produced Claire Pemberton was not dismantled by Claire Pemberton's departure. The system is the building and the industry and the history and the template that sorts people into categories before they open their mouths. And the template is installed early and reinforced constantly, and it operates in the space between what people believe about themselves and what they do. And that space is the most dangerous space in any organization, because it is the space where good people do harmful things and call it judgment. Nadine Jeffers is in the room now. She earned the room. She earned it not because the system worked, but because she worked, and because her mother worked, and because her father worked until a highway in the rain took him, and because 3 generations of effort and loss and discipline and the particular stubbornness of people who refused to let the gap become the story finally accumulated enough weight to open a door that should have been open all along. The watch ticks on her wrist. The numbers are on the page. The kitchen is waiting on Sunday. Yellow walls, parking lot view, Gloria at the table, the calculator between them, the radio on, the ledger open, the truth written in ink that does not fade. This is what the numbers show. Read them or do not. They do not need your approval. They need your attention. And if you have read this far, they have it.